Waiter insults Elon Musk at a luxury restaurant. But when he discovered the truth, you won't believe what happened. The rain softly struck the windows of Le Petit Jardin, a discreet yet elegant restaurant in the heart of San Francisco. The establishment, with its cream-colored walls and dim lighting, was a refuge for those looking to escape the city's hustle and bustle. It was 8:45 in the evening, and the aroma of freshly baked bread mixed with subtle notes of fresh herbs and melted butter. Elon Musk ran his hand over his face, trying to shake off the exhaustion that had piled up over the past week. The dark circles under his eyes betrayed countless sleepless nights spent resolving crises at his companies. His phone kept vibrating in the pocket of his worn jeans, but for the first time that day, he decided to ignore it. Just one night, he murmured to himself as he pushed open the heavy wooden door of the restaurant. One night without being Elon Musk. The hostess, a young woman with blonde hair tied into an immaculate bun, barely glanced at him. His black sweater, which had seen better days, and his faded jeans didn't suggest he was the usual type of customer for the establishment. "Table for one?" she asked, flipping through the reservation book with little interest. "Yes, preferably something away from the windows," Musk replied, mentally thanking her for not recognizing him. In the kitchen, Miguel Ramirez was polishing a wine glass as he listened to his coworkers' complaints. At 35 years old, he had spent half his life working in restaurants, and the last 5 years at Le Petit Jardin had been particularly challenging. "Did you see the guy who just walked in?" Sarah, one of the waitresses, commented while picking up an order. "He looks like he got lost on the way to McDonald's." Miguel glanced through the kitchen door. "The guy at table 15? That's my section. Great, another one here to occupy a table for 2 hours just to order a salad and tap water." The night had started poorly for Miguel. Earlier, his mother had called to tell him she needed another expensive treatment, and the insurance refused to cover it. The bills were piling up, and his younger sister depended on him to pay for college. "Chef Auguste is in a terrible mood," Carlos, another waiter, warned as he entered the kitchen. Someone criticized his soufflé on Yelp. Miguel adjusted his black apron and reviewed his notepad. Table 15 would be his 6th of the day, and it wasn't even 9 p.m. yet. He headed over, practicing his professional smile, even though inside he felt like the world was collapsing. Meanwhile, Musk scanned the menu without really reading it. His mind wandered between the latest problems at Tesla, a new investigation into autopilot safety, controversies on X, another scandal over content moderation, and concerns at SpaceX delays with the next launch. The weight of being the most talked about man on the planet felt particularly heavy that night. "Good evening," Miguel's voice interrupted his thoughts. "I'm Miguel, and I'll be your waiter tonight. Can I get you something to drink while you review the menu?" Musk looked up from his phone, where he had just read yet another negative headline about himself. "A whiskey neat, please. Whatever you have." Miguel narrowed his eyes slightly. The restaurant was known for its extensive wine list and French cuisine, not its spirits. "We have Macallan 18-year-old for $1,045 a shot," he replied, with a tone that suggested his client might want to reconsider. "That's fine," Musk murmured, returning to his phone. Miguel walked away, muttering under his breath about customers who didn't even appreciate where they were dining. At the bar, Sarah waited with a mocking smile. "Your table 15 seems fascinating," she joked while preparing martinis. "He could at least pretend he knows where he is," Miguel replied. "Did you see how he's dressed? This isn't Denny's." At his table, Musk was aware of the staff's glances and murmurs. He found it almost amusing. After weeks of constant adulation and people trying to impress him, there was something refreshing about being treated like a nobody. The restaurant began to fill up. A couple celebrating their anniversary took the table next to his, the man in an impeccable suit, the woman in a dress that likely cost more than Miguel's car. At another table, a group of tech executives animatedly discussed their latest funding round. Miguel returned with the whiskey, setting it on the table with less care than necessary. A few drops splashed onto the white tablecloth. "Are you ready to order?" he asked, his pen tapping rhythmically against the notepad. Musk closed the menu. What do you recommend? The question seemed to irritate Miguel further. Everything on our menu is excellent, he replied dryly. But maybe you'd like to start with something simple, like the soup of the day. It's more accessible. Accessible? Musk raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the barely veiled audacity of the waiter. Yes, $15. Miguel emphasized the price as if speaking to a child. The lobster is market price, which today is significantly higher. A message lit up Musk's phone. Another problem at the Berlin factory. He ignored it, finding the waiter's attitude strangely entertaining. I'll have the foie gras to start, Musk said, pronouncing foie gras in a way that made Miguel visibly wince. And then the filet mignon, medium rare. Miguel couldn't help himself. Are you sure? Foie gras is quite sophisticated. It's not for everyone's palate. At the next table, the anniversary couple exchanged uncomfortable glances. The waiter's attitude was clearly inappropriate, but Musk seemed almost amused. I'm sure, Musk replied simply. And a bottle of wine. What do you suggest? Miguel looked at Musk's worn sweater and then at the wine list. We have a pretty basic Merlot for $50. Probably more suitable for your budget. Bring me the Chateau Lafite Rothschild 2010, Musk responded, naming one of the most expensive wines on the list without even glancing at it. Miguel paled slightly. Sir, that wine costs $2,500 a bottle. Perhaps you should. The bottle will be fine, Musk interrupted, returning to his phone. Miguel walked away, muttering under his breath about customers trying to pretend to be what they weren't. In the kitchen, he shared the story with his coworkers. I bet his card gets declined, Sarah laughed. Remember the guy last month who tried to impress his date and ended up washing dishes? As the night progressed, Miguel grew bolder in his condescending remarks. When Musk mispronounced Bordeaux, Miguel corrected him with barely disguised disdain. When Musk asked for ketchup for his 1220 steak, Miguel practically had to restrain himself from rolling his eyes. You know, Miguel said while clearing the dessert plate. Next time, there's a lovely place nearby called Burger King. I think you'd feel more comfortable there. The diners at nearby tables held their breath, expecting an outburst of anger that never came. Instead, Musk gave a slight smile and pulled out his phone, seemingly to record something. The rain outside had intensified, and occasional thunder provided a dramatic backdrop to the scene about to unfold. Miguel had no idea that his life was about to take a radical turn. For now, however, he was just another grumpy waiter at a luxury restaurant, trying to survive another night. In the kitchen, the staff placed bets on whether the customer at table 15 would be able to pay the bill. None of them imagined they were witnessing the beginning of a story that would soon become legendary at the restaurant. The night was drawing to a close, and Miguel prepared the bill with a mix of anticipation and disdain. The total came to over $3,000, a sum he was sure would create an awkward moment. As he walked toward table 15, he mentally rehearsed what he would say when the card was declined. But that revealing moment would have to wait until the next chapter of this story, because for now, Miguel remained simply a waiter who had dared to treat one of the most powerful men in the world with disdain. Without the slightest idea of who he really was. The atmosphere in the restaurant had subtly shifted. The diners at nearby tables, initially absorbed in their own conversations, were now discreetly paying attention to the interaction between the arrogant waiter and the seemingly humble customer at table 15. Excuse me, Musk called out to Miguel as he passed by with a tray of desserts for another table. Could you bring me another whiskey? Miguel let out an exaggerated sigh. Are you sure you wouldn't prefer a glass of water? It's on the house. An executive at the neighboring table nearly choked on her wine upon hearing the remark. Her dining companion looked at her with a mix of amusement and embarrassment. The whiskey will be fine, Musk replied, who had begun to find an odd pleasure in the situation. It was the first time in months that someone treated him without any kind of flattery or fear. In the kitchen, Sarah intercepted Miguel as he prepared the order. "Don't you think you're pushing it a little?" she whispered, though her tone suggested more admiration than concern. "Thomas is going to kill you if he hears how you're talking to the customers." Miguel poured the whiskey with a dismissive gesture. "Did you see how he holds his utensils? Like he's never eaten in a fine dining place before. And he ordered the foie gras just to show off. He didn't even know how to appreciate it properly." "Even so," Sarah bit her lip, "there's something about him that feels familiar." "Yeah, he looks like every wannabe tech guy who comes here pretending to be the next Steve Jobs," Miguel replied, adding sarcastically, "I'm sure he has a revolutionary startup in his garage." Meanwhile, Chef Auguste had discreetly peeked out from the kitchen to observe the customer at table 15. His expression oscillated between professional indignation at the ketchup request and barely concealed curiosity. "Mon Dieu," he muttered, "how does someone order a Chateau Lafite and then pair it with ketchup? C'est un crime." The manager, Thomas, who had been observing the situation from afar, finally decided to approach Musk's table. There was something about the customer that gave him an uneasy feeling, as if he was missing something obvious. "Good evening, sir," Thomas said with a professional smile. "Is everything to your liking?" Musk looked up from his phone. "Everything's excellent, especially the service. It has a unique touch." Thomas noticed the amused glint in the customer's eyes and felt his unease grow. "I'm glad to hear that. If there's anything you need—" "Actually," Musk interrupted, "could you prepare the chocolate soufflé? I noticed it takes about 20 minutes. At that moment, Miguel was returning with the whiskey. "The soufflé is quite sophisticated," he commented, ignoring Thomas's warning look. "Perhaps ice cream would be more appropriate for your palate?" Thomas held his breath, expecting a complaint that never came. Instead, the customer smiled and said, "The soufflé will be fine. And perhaps you could explain to me what makes it so sophisticated." For the first time that evening, Miguel was momentarily at a loss for words. The customer's calm demeanor and apparent amusement unsettled him more and more. At the table celebrating their anniversary, the husband leaned toward his wife and whispered, "That guy must be someone important. No one stays this calm under such terrible service unless they're used to handling much more intense situations." The woman nodded, discreetly studying the customer at table 15. "There's something about the way he sits, the way he observes everything. He's not an ordinary diner." The rain outside had ceased, but the fogged-up windows created an intimate atmosphere in the restaurant. The clock struck 10:30 p.m., and most diners had begun to leave. Only a few tables remained occupied, including Musk's. Miguel was preparing the check with a mix of anticipation and disdain. 3,247.85. It was more than he earned in a month. As he walked toward table 15, his mind replayed every interaction of the night, every sarcastic comment, every condescending glance. "If you need me to explain the numbers," Miguel began, placing the check on the table. "That won't be necessary," Musk replied, pulling a black card from his worn wallet. For a moment, Miguel stared at the card. It was different from regular credit cards, heavier, with a minimalist design But that moment of recognition would have to wait until the next chapter, because for now, Miguel was still just a proud waiter who had spent the night belittling someone without realizing he was about to receive the surprise of his life. The restaurant clock read 10:45 p.m., and what seemed like an ordinary evening was about to turn into a story that none of those present would ever forget. The night progressed at Le Petit Jardin as Miguel continued his service routine, now with renewed confidence after his series of condescending interactions with the customer at table 15. The restaurant had significantly emptied, creating a more intimate atmosphere that amplified every comment and gesture. "Would you like to see the wine list again?" Miguel asked, his tone laden with irony as he held out the iPad displaying the digital selection. "I can show you the wines by the glass. They're more manageable." Musk, who had been discreetly adjusting the position of his phone on the table, nodded with an enigmatic smile. "Why don't you surprise me? Something that pairs well with the soufflé." The response momentarily unsettled Miguel. It wasn't the defensive reaction he had hoped to provoke. At the bar, Sarah polished glasses, increasingly intrigued by the dynamic between the waiter and the peculiar customer. "Miguel," Sarah whispered as he approached the bar, "doesn't this seem off to you? He's way too calm about your attitude." "Probably doesn't even understand that I'm insulting him," Miguel replied, selecting a bottle of Sauternes with a touch of malice. "These tech guys live in their own little bubbles." In the kitchen, Chef Auguste prepared the soufflé, muttering in French about customers who didn't appreciate hot cuisine. Meanwhile, manager Thomas couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something important. "Here you go," Miguel said, returning to Musk's table with a glass of golden wine. "A Chateau Sudoirot, though you might find its flavor a bit complex." Musk took the glass and examined it with genuine interest. "Interesting choice. What made you pick a Sauternes?" The question, asked with evident knowledge, made Miguel hesitate for a second. "It's the traditional pairing for soufflé," he replied, regaining his condescending tone. "Though I suppose you'd prefer a Coca-Cola." At a nearby table, a group of tech executives who had been observing the interaction for the past hour exchanged meaningful glances. One of them discreetly pulled out his phone and began typing something. "Sarah," one of the executives called to the bartender, "is that waiter always like this with customers?" Sarah, wiping down the bar, shook her head. "Miguel is usually very professional. Something about this customer has him, especially inspired tonight." Meanwhile, Musk had pulled out his phone again. The screen displayed several notifications from Twitter News about Tesla's latest controversy, but he ignored them, opting instead to open a voice recording app. "Mind if I record some work notes?" Musk asked Miguel as he returned to check on the soufflé. "The atmosphere here is very inspiring." "Oh, are you working on the next big app?" Miguel responded, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Another revolutionary social network? Or maybe something in blockchain?" Musk suppressed a smile as he adjusted his phone. "Something like that. It's always helpful to document interesting experiences." In the kitchen, Chef Auguste was finishing the decoration on the soufflé when Thomas approached with a worried expression. "Auguste, doesn't the customer at table 15 look familiar to you?" The chef paused, studying the customer through the kitchen window. "Maintenant que tu le dis, there's something familiar about him, but it can't be who I'm thinking of. That guy wouldn't come alone and dress like that." Miguel returned to the kitchen to collect the soufflé, catching the tail end of the conversation between Thomas and Auguste. "What are you two staring at?" he asked, adjusting his apron. "Miguel," Thomas began cautiously, "have you noticed anything particular about the customer at table 15? Other than his complete lack of class and his pretense of being more sophisticated than he is?" Miguel replied, taking the plate with the soufflé. "He's your typical Silicon Valley wannabe who thinks he can buy sophistication with a credit card." Thomas tried to say more, but Miguel was already heading to Musk's table with the dessert. On his way, he passed Sarah, who stopped him briefly. "Miguel, one of the executives at table 6 just showed me something on his phone," she whispered urgently. "I think you should." "Not now, Sarah," Miguel interrupted. "I need to serve this soufflé before it deflates." Reaching Musk's table, Miguel placed the dessert down with an exaggerated flourish. "Your soufflé, sir. Do you need me to explain how to eat it? It's quite a bit more sophisticated than a Starbucks brownie." Musk, who had been discreetly recording with his phone, angled it slightly to better capture the moment. "Please, enlighten me. I'm always eager to learn." The response, once again devoid of the irritation Miguel expected, left him momentarily puzzled. He had been provoking the customer all night, and instead of getting angry, Musk seemed increasingly amused. At the bar, Sarah was hyperventilating after seeing what the executive had shown her on his phone. Thomas noticed her distress and quickly approached. "Sarah, are you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Thomas," she whispered, discreetly pointing toward table 15. "Do you know who that customer is?" Before Thomas could answer, Miguel returned to the bar, shaking his head in disbelief. "Can you believe he just asked me about the physics of why a soufflé rises? Like he actually cares about the science behind. Miguel, Sarah interrupted urgently. There's something you need to know. But Miguel had already turned away, responding to a gesture from Musk requesting more wine. On his way back to the table, he stopped briefly at the service station to check his phone. He had 3 messages from his sister. Miguel, are you watching the news? Answer me, this is important. Please tell me you're not being yourself tonight. He ignored the messages, assuming it was some family drama, and continued to Musk's table with the wine. You know, Miguel began as he poured, it's refreshing to see someone pretend so much interest in gastronomy. Most tech guys who come here just want to show off how much they can spend. Musk took a sip of wine, studying Miguel over the rim of his glass. And what makes you so sure I'm pretending? Oh, please, Miguel scoffed. I've been in this business for 15 years. I can tell the difference between someone who genuinely appreciates fine dining and someone who's just trying to keep up appearances. The way you hold your utensils, how you pronounce French names, the fact that you asked for ketchup with a prime steak, it all screams new money trying to fit in. At nearby tables, several diners held their breath, torn between disbelief and morbid fascination. The group of tech executives had stopped pretending they weren't listening, and one of them was discreetly filming the scene on his phone. 15 years is a long time, Musk commented, adjusting his phone again on the table. You must have seen all kinds of customers. Oh, absolutely, Miguel replied, oblivious to Sarah's desperate attempts to get his attention from the bar. But you tech guys are my favorite category. Always so sure you're changing the world with your apps and cryptocurrencies. Musk tilted his head, genuinely intrigued. And what do you think about electric cars? Ha! Miguel couldn't suppress a mocking laugh. Like Tesla, please. Elon Musk is just another billionaire playing Tony Stark. At least he knows how to dress appropriately for dinner, unlike... Miguel's voice trailed off as realization began to dawn. Something about the amused expression on his customer's face, the way he had mentioned Tesla, the phone recording on the table. A chill ran down his spine. At the bar, Sarah had buried her face in her hands, unable to keep watching the unfolding disaster. Thomas had started walking toward table 15, but stopped when he saw that Miguel was finally putting the pieces together. Miguel swallowed hard, his mind racing through every sarcastic comment, every condescending gesture he had made that evening. Excuse me, sir, but you're not? But that revelation, that moment of horrified understanding, would have to wait until the next chapter. For now, Miguel stood frozen next to the table as the weight of his actions began to crash down on him like an avalanche in slow motion. The restaurant clock read 11:15 p.m., and the night that had started with a waiter's arrogance was about to take a turn that would change his life forever. The silence that followed was deafening. The few diners still remaining in the restaurant had stopped pretending not to observe the scene. The group of executives had placed their phones on the table, recording every moment. Even Chef Auguste had peeked out from the kitchen, his white hat visible through the service window. Sir, Miguel felt his legs turn to jelly. His mind replayed every scathing comment he had made throughout the evening on an endless loop. Musk raised a hand, cutting off what was sure to be a stammering apology. You were saying something about Tony Stark? Miguel's face had gone pale. His throat was so dry he could barely speak. I didn't know. I never imagined. That the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX might dine alone in jeans? Musk finished the sentence, a faint smile playing on his lips as he adjusted his phone one last time. Sarah appeared beside Miguel, practically materializing out of nowhere. Mr. Musk, please accept our sincerest apologies. Miguel is usually very professional, and... Is he? Musk interrupted, his tone genuinely curious. Because in the past 2 hours, I've seen something quite different. Fascinating, I must admit. Thomas, the manager, finally mustered the courage to approach the table. His forehead glistened with sweat. Mr. Musk, as the manager of Le Petit Jardin, I want to express our deepest... You know what's most interesting? Musk interrupted again, addressing Miguel while ignoring Thomas's attempts at apology. It's the first honest conversation I've had in weeks. No flattery, no hidden agendas. Just brutal honesty. Miguel blinked, confused. His brain was still trying to process the situation. You're not angry? Angry? Musk let out a small laugh. I've been recording every interaction. It's refreshing to encounter someone who says exactly what they think, even if it's not very diplomatic. At the executives' table, one of them whispered to his companions, "Classic Elon, turning a disaster into a social study opportunity." Chef Auguste had completely abandoned any pretense of being busy in the kitchen and now stood at the doorway, his mustache quivering with excitement. "Mon Dieu, I have Elon Musk critiquing my soufflé." "About that," Miguel began, recalling his earlier comments about the soufflé and feeling a fresh wave of shame. "Actually, it's delicious," Musk remarked, taking another bite. "Though I must admit, ketchup would have been an interesting addition." The joke elicited a nervous giggle from Sarah, which she immediately tried to stifle with a cough. Miguel, on the other hand, felt the world spinning around him. His phone buzzed incessantly in his pocket, probably his sister, frantically trying to warn him about who his customer was. "Mr. Musk," Thomas tried again, "please allow us to make amends in some way. Dinner is on the house, and miss the pleasure of using my card after all the comments about my supposed budget limits." Musk smiled, pulling out the black card he had shown earlier. "That would be anticlimactic, don't you think, Miguel?" Hearing his name from Musk's lips sent a shiver down Miguel's spine. "Sir, about my comments on Tesla and, well, about you. The ones about me being a billionaire playing Tony Stark?" Musk seemed to consider the comparison. "You're not the first to make it, though people usually don't say it to my face while serving wine." The executives at the nearby table had begun live streaming discreetly, knowing the story would go viral within hours. Musk's handling of the situation was quintessentially his unconventional style. "You know," Musk continued, looking directly at Miguel, "brutal honesty is a rare quality these days. Especially in my world, where everyone is so worried about saying the right thing, not offending, keeping up appearances." Miguel shifted uncomfortably, aware that every word and gesture was being captured not only by Musk's phone, but also by the multiple devices now pointed in his direction. "Which brings me to a question." Musk leaned forward, his eyes glinting with genuine curiosity. "Why did you choose to be so direct with me tonight?" The question took Miguel by surprise. He had expected anger, a threat of dismissal, maybe even a lawsuit. Not this surreal conversation about honesty and authenticity. Miguel looked around, noting the expectant faces of his co-workers, the phones recording Musk's amused expression. "I guess I got tired of the pretense. Of people coming here pretending to be something they're not, trying to impress, and when I saw you, with your jeans and worn sweater, I assumed that I was another pretentious techie trying to show off," Musk finished. "The irony is delicious, isn't it?" A clap of thunder echoed in the distance, as if the weather itself wanted to add drama to the moment. The rain had started again, softly tapping against the restaurant windows. "For what it's worth," Miguel added with a nervous smile, "your French pronunciations really are terrible." Musk's laugh echoed through the restaurant, breaking the accumulated tension. Even Thomas, who had been on the verge of a nervous breakdown, allowed himself a small smile. "Miguel," Musk said, picking up his phone, "you've provided the most authentic material I've recorded in months. The question is, what should I do with it?" Miguel's heart stopped for a moment. This night could end in 1,000 different ways, and not all of them involved keeping his job or dignity. But for some reason, the expression on Musk's face suggested that this story might have an unexpected ending. The night was far from over, and Miguel's fate hung by a thread. But that would be part of the next chapter of this extraordinary evening. Midnight was drawing near at Le Petit Jardin, and the electrifying atmosphere that followed the moment of recognition had given way to a different tension. Miguel, still standing by Musk's table, felt the weight of every second as he processed the magnitude of what had unfolded. "Miguel," Thomas's voice cut through the silence, "I think you should take your break, now." But Musk raised a hand. "Actually, I'd like Miguel to stay. I have a few more questions." Sarah, who had been watching from the bar, approached with a new bottle of wine, her hands trembling slightly as she poured. "Mr. Musk, perhaps you'd prefer something more exclusive from our cellar?" "This is perfect," Musk replied, not taking his eyes off Miguel. "So, tell me more about your thoughts on billionaires playing Tony Stark." Miguel felt his throat tighten. In his pocket, his phone buzzed incessantly with messages that no longer mattered. His mind wandered to his sick mother, the unpaid medical bills, his sister in college. He began, but the words stuck in his throat. "You know," Musk continued, reviewing the recordings on his phone, "it's fascinating how people's behavior changes when they realize who I am. But you were brutally honest all night. Until exactly," he glanced at his phone, 12 minutes ago. In the kitchen, Chef Auguste had nervously begun preparing more desserts, his way of coping with stress. "C'est un désastre," he muttered as he furiously whipped a cream. The executives at the nearby table were still discreetly streaming, their social media followers growing by the minute as the drama unfolded in real time. "Mr. Musk," Thomas tried again, "I understand Miguel's behavior was entirely inappropriate, but he has a difficult family situation. His mother is ill and—" "Is that true?" Musk interrupted, his expression subtly shifting. Miguel nodded slowly. "Pancreatic cancer. The insurance, it doesn't cover all the treatments." "And yet," Musk said, consulting the recordings again, "you suggested I order the soup because it was more accessible. The irony is fascinating." Sarah appeared with a chair. "Miguel, sit down before you pass out." "I can't sit at a customer's table," Miguel responded automatically, his training as a waiter kicking in even amidst the crisis. "I think we're past formalities," Musk said with a smile. "Sit." Miguel sank into the chair, his legs finally giving out. The restaurant was practically empty now, save for the executives still documenting everything, and a few staff members pretending to work while watching the scene. "Your comment about Tesla was particularly interesting," Musk continued, playing a portion of the recording. "Do you really think I'm just playing at being innovative?" Not really," Miguel admitted. "It's just that when you've served tables for 15 years, you see a lot of pretense, especially in San Francisco. Everyone thinks they're changing the world with the next big app or startup. And Tesla isn't changing the world." "It is," Miguel said, regaining some of his earlier honesty. "But from where I stand, electric cars are something I'll never be able to afford. My 2005 Honda Civic barely works, but it's all I can afford while helping my mom and sister." Musk leaned back in his chair, studying Miguel with renewed interest. "Go on." It's like living in two different worlds," Miguel said, the words starting to flow. "I serve dinners that cost more than my monthly salary to people who talk about changing the world, while I can't pay my mom's medical bills. It's not that I don't appreciate innovation, it's just frustration," Musk finished. "And tonight, when you saw someone who seemed to be pretending to belong to that world, I took it out on you," Miguel admitted, "which was completely unprofessional and refreshingly honest," Musk interrupted. "Do you know how many people tell me exactly what they think, without filters or an agenda?" Thomas, who had been holding his breath, finally interjected. "Mr. Musk, I understand you appreciate honesty, but Miguel's behavior tonight was exactly what I needed," Musk finished. "Think of it as an impromptu social experiment. How many CEOs really know how they're perceived by everyday people? Not analysts, not the media, but someone who serves tables and struggles to make ends meet." The executives at the nearby table had stopped streaming, realizing they were witnessing something deeper than a simple viral confrontation. "However," Musk continued, his tone growing more serious, "there are consequences for our actions. Miguel, you've provided a unique perspective tonight, but you've also demonstrated questionable judgment. Miguel's heart sank. Here it was, the firing, the public humiliation, the end of his ability to support his family. I understand, sir, he said, his voice barely a whisper, and I accept whatever consequences there are. Just please don't have me fired. My mom depends on my health insurance. Musk picked up his phone and replayed another snippet of the recordings. At least he knows how to dress appropriately for dinner, unlike... The irony, Musk said, is that I specifically dressed like this tonight because I wanted a quiet dinner without the usual circus that follows me. And I ended up finding something much more interesting. Sarah, who had been nearby the entire time, couldn't contain herself. So you're not going to fire him? Fire him? Musk seemed genuinely surprised. Why would I waste someone who's not afraid to tell the truth? Miguel looked up, confused. I don't understand. Your problem, Miguel, isn't honesty. It's judgment when and how to be honest. But honesty itself, that's something I can't buy with all my billions. Miguel's eyes filled with tears. The tension of the night, the fear, the adrenaline, all of it was finally catching up to him. That said, Musk continued, these recordings are quite compromising. The question is, what should I do with them? The silence that followed was deafening. Every member of the restaurant staff held their breath, waiting for Musk's final decision. But that crucial moment, that decision that would change Miguel's life, would have to wait for the next chapter. For now, the waiter who had unknowingly insulted the world's richest man remained in limbo, teetering between disaster and possible redemption. The clock struck 12:15 a.m., and the night still had more surprises in store for everyone present. The rain struck the windows with greater intensity now, as if nature itself were providing the perfect soundtrack for this pivotal moment. Musk idly toyed with his phone, where the night's recordings waited like silent evidence. Do you know what's most interesting about these recordings, Miguel? Musk asked, playing another snippet. It's not just your comments about me. It's your entire perspective on the tech world, inequality, innovation, all from the point of view of someone living at the intersection of those worlds. Sarah returned with another round of coffee, her hands steadier now that the situation seemed less catastrophic. Mr. Musk, may I ask why you started recording in the first place? Instinct, Musk replied, accepting the cup. When Miguel made his first comment about my limited budget, something told me this night would be educational. The executives at the nearby table began murmuring amongst themselves. One of them, a woman in an elegant suit, finally spoke up loud enough to be heard. Excuse me, Mr. Musk, but this is exactly the kind of perspective we need in Silicon Valley. The tech bubble has isolated us from the realities most people face. Miguel shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I wasn't trying to be a sociological study. The best insights are rarely intentional, Musk replied. But let's talk about your personal situation. You mentioned your mother. How much does her treatment cost? The abrupt change of topic caught Miguel off guard. About $12,000 a month. Insurance covers part of it, but we still need around $8,000 extra. And your sister in college? Partial scholarship, Miguel explained. I work double shifts on weekends to help with the rest. Chef Auguste, who had been listening from the kitchen, emerged with a plate of macarons. Pour vous, he said, placing them on the table. And Miguel, mon ami, I never knew. No one did, Miguel interrupted. I didn't want anyone's pity. I'd rather deal with sarcastic comments about pretentious millionaires, he added, flashing a small smile at Musk. Speaking of sarcastic comments, Musk played another recording. He probably has a revolutionary startup in his garage. The irony isn't lost on me, Miguel admitted, blushing, considering Tesla literally started. In a garage, yes, Musk finished, though probably with better funding than your 2005 Honda Civic. The remark elicited nervous laughter from the restaurant. Even Thomas, who had been on edge all night, allowed himself a faint smile. Mr. Musk, Thomas interjected, I understand you find Miguel's perspective interesting, But as the manager, I can't overlook the fact that his behavior tonight was inappropriate, unprofessional, brutally honest. Musk finished the thought. Yes, all of that. But it was also real, and reality is something in short supply in my world. Miguel caught his reflection in one of the empty wine glasses. The arrogant waiter from earlier in the night had been replaced by someone smaller, more vulnerable, but perhaps more authentic. If I could go back, Miguel began. Would you change anything? Musk interrupted. Would you be more flattering, more fake? The question hung in the air for a moment. The executives had turned their phones back on, sensing the significance of Miguel's response. No, Miguel finally said. I'd probably be more respectful in how I expressed it, but the frustration, the inequality, the feeling of living in parallel worlds, all of that is real. Musk nodded slowly, as if Miguel had passed some kind of test. What if I told you these recordings could be the start of something bigger? Bigger? Miguel frowned. Like what? Like a conversation Silicon Valley needs to hear, Musk replied. A raw, unfiltered perspective on the gap between technological innovation and everyday reality. The executives at the nearby table leaned in, intrigued. Sarah nearly spilled the coffee she was serving. But first, Musk continued, we need to address some practical matters, like your mother's treatment. Miguel's heart skipped a beat. Mr. Musk, I wasn't trying to. I know. Musk interrupted. That's what makes it genuine. You weren't asking for help or trying to impress me. You were just being honest, even if that honesty bordered on insubordination. The rain outside had begun to let up, as if even the weather wanted to hear what came next. The clock struck 1 a.m. and Miguel's fate was about to take an unexpected turn. But that moment of revelation, the instant when a waiter's life would change forever, would have to wait for the next chapter. For now, the tension in Le Petit Jardin continued to build, as everyone held their breath, waiting to see how this extraordinary night would come to an end. The early hours of the morning settled over Le Petit Jardin, and the decision that would determine Miguel's fate hung heavy in the air. The clock read 1:15 a.m., and not a single soul had left the restaurant, as if an invisible spell kept everyone rooted to their seats, awaiting the conclusion of this extraordinary night. Before we move forward, Musk said, scrolling through his phone, I'd like to replay something specific from tonight. Miguel's recorded voice echoed through the silent restaurant. In my position, people are usually fake. You treated me like any other customer, though not in the best way. It's fascinating, Musk continued, how people's behavior changes when they know who I am. Investors, employees, even waiters, everyone has a mask ready. Thomas cleared his throat nervously. Mr. Musk, once again, I'd like to express. Do you know how many people work directly under me at Tesla? Musk interrupted, ignoring the manager. Miguel blinked, thrown off by the sudden change of topic. Thousands? Thousands, Musk confirmed. And do you know how many dare to tell me when they think I'm wrong? Sarah, still nearby with the coffee pot, murmured. After tonight, probably one fewer. On the contrary, Musk replied with a smile. Tonight has made me think about something important. Miguel, how long did you say you've been in the service industry? 15 years, sir. 15 years observing Silicon Valley's elite. Musk mused. 15 years listening to their conversations, watching their behavior, witnessing the disconnect between their grand visions and everyday reality. The executives at the nearby table shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the truth in his words. And in all that time, Musk continued, you've developed a unique perspective, one that isn't afraid to point out contradictions, even if it's not very diplomatic. Miguel swallowed hard. Mr. Musk, about that. My communications team at Tesla, Musk interrupted, is full of brilliant professionals. PR experts, media strategists, image consultants, all highly qualified and all terribly careful not to offend. Chef Auguste, who had been eavesdropping from the kitchen, emerged once more. Mon Dieu, are you saying what I think you're saying? What I need, Musk continued, ignoring the interruption, Isn't more people telling me what I want to hear? I need someone who isn't afraid to tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. A silence so profound fell over the restaurant that even the rain outside seemed to pause to listen. Mr. Musk, one of the executives at the nearby table, ventured, "Are you considering?" Miguel, Musk leaned forward. "What would you say if I offered you a job?" The sound of a glass breaking echoed through the restaurant. Sarah had dropped the one she was cleaning. "A job?" Miguel could barely process the words. "At Tesla?" "On my communications team," Musk confirmed. "Not to polish messages or manage PR, but to provide the raw, honest perspective you demonstrated tonight." Thomas staggered slightly, needing to steady himself on a nearby chair. But he insulted you. He mocked you all night." "Exactly," Musk replied, "and in the process, he offered more insights into public perception of Tesla and technology than 6 months of focus groups." Miguel looked around, as if expecting someone to reveal that this was an elaborate joke. "But I don't know anything about corporate communications." "That's precisely the point," Musk said. "I don't need another communications expert. I need someone who understands the disconnect between Silicon Valley and the real world. Someone who's lived that disconnect for 15 years. The executives at the nearby table began frantically taking notes. This was exactly the kind of unconventional move Musk was known for. "The salary," Musk continued, "would be significantly higher than a waiter's. Enough to cover your mother's treatment and your sister's education." Tears welled up in Miguel's eyes. I don't know what to say." "Say what you really think," Musk replied, "as you've been doing all night." Miguel took a deep breath. "Honestly, I think you're crazy." Laughter erupted in the restaurant, breaking the tension that had been building for hours. "Probably," Musk admitted. "But that madness has gotten us pretty far. So, what do you say?" "What if I mess everything up?" Miguel asked. "I'm not exactly known for my tact." "Oh, you'll definitely mess things up sometimes," Musk replied with a grin. "But I'd rather have someone fail honestly than succeed dishonestly." Sarah, who had been holding back tears, finally let out a sob. "This is like a Hallmark movie, but with billionaires and sarcastic waiters." Then, Musk extended his hand. "Do we have a deal?" Miguel stared at the outstretched hand, then at his coworkers, who watched with a mix of awe and joy. He thought of his mother, the medical bills, his sister struggling to stay in college. "On one condition," he said finally. Musk raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What's that?" "That you let me keep being honest, even when that honesty isn't comfortable." "Miguel," Musk replied with a smile, "that's not a condition. That's exactly why I'm hiring you." Their hands clasped, and spontaneous applause broke out in the restaurant. Chef Auguste had begun uncorking bottles of champagne, while Thomas finally relaxed, realizing his restaurant wouldn't be facing a lawsuit after all. "You know what's the most ironic part?" Sarah said as she poured the champagne. "Your worst night as a waiter turned out to be the best night of your life." Miguel looked around at the smiling faces of his soon-to-be former co-workers, the executive still documenting the scene, and Elon Musk sitting calmly with a glass of champagne in hand. "The last time I served at table," Miguel said, raising his glass, "I'll leave a note for my co-workers. Treat everyone with respect, not because they might be disguised millionaires, but because it's the right thing to do. Though in my case, being a jerk somehow landed me a better job." Laughter and toasts continued as the night stretched on. Outside, the rain had completely stopped, and the first rays of dawn began to peek over the San Francisco skyline. A week later, Miguel attended his first meeting at Tesla, earning a salary that not only covered his mother's treatment, but also secured his sister's educational future. His first task, reviewing a draft press release and saying exactly what he thought about it. No filters. Dawn broke over Le Petit Jardin as the remaining guests shared stories and laughter. Chef Auguste had prepared an impromptu breakfast to celebrate, and the aroma of freshly baked croissants filled the air. "You know what's the funniest part?" Sarah asked as she poured fresh coffee. All the customers who tried impressing Miguel with their wine knowledge over the years, and he ends up getting a job at Tesla by doing the exact opposite. Miguel, now more relaxed but still processing the night's events, chuckled. I guess I should update my LinkedIn. How about, from critiquing billionaires to working for one? I prefer brutal honesty specialist, suggested Musk, who surprisingly was still there, seemingly enjoying the casual atmosphere. The executives who had witnessed everything were finally preparing to leave. One of them approached the table. Mr. Musk, the executive said, this is going to change how many companies think about honest feedback. May I quote you in my next conference? Go ahead, Musk replied. But make sure you mention that the ketchup with the steak was the tipping point. Thomas, who had been crunching numbers in his office, returned with a bewildered expression. Mr. Musk, about the bill. Charge it as usual, Musk interrupted, and include a generous tip for Miguel. Consider it his last service. Speaking of service, Chef Auguste interjected. Miguel, mon ami, perhaps you could put in a good word for us at Tesla, for corporate events. Auguste, Miguel replied with a grin. After the way I treated your most important customer, I think you owe me a few favors. The laughter continued as the sun climbed higher in the sky. Miguel pulled out his phone to find dozens of unread messages from his family. I think I should call my mom, he said, his voice breaking slightly. Use my office, Thomas offered, and Miguel. I'm sorry for all the times I scolded you for being too direct with customers. Clearly, you knew something I didn't. As Miguel stepped away to make the most important call of his life, Musk addressed the remaining staff. Do you know why I really hired him? He asked, staring at the last drops of coffee in his cup. Not just for his honesty, it's his ability to see through pretension. In a world where everyone is trying to be something they're not, someone who can point out the truth of it when it's uncomfortable is invaluable. Sarah gathered the last of the champagne glasses. And the recordings? What will you do with them? I'll keep them, Musk replied with a smile, as a reminder that sometimes the best ideas come from the most unexpected places. And maybe, someday, when Miguel is presenting in a boardroom, I'll play them just to see his face. In Thomas's office, Miguel was finishing telling his mother the news. Tears streamed freely down his face as he listened to her joyful sobs on the other end of the line. Mom, he said through his tears, you won't have to worry about the bills anymore, and Maria can finish college. Everything's going to be okay. When he returned to the dining room, he found someone had improvised a sign that read, From waiter to executive, a Silicon Valley tale. It's a bit much, Miguel remarked. Oh, you haven't seen anything yet, Musk replied. Wait until the media finds out. Waiter insults Elon Musk and lands Tesla job. The headlines write themselves. About that, Thomas interjected, should we prepare a press release? Let it be, Musk said. Some stories are better told naturally. Besides, he added, glancing at Miguel, I think my new communications advisor would prefer to keep it authentic. The sun was high in the sky by the time farewells began. The morning shift employees arrived, bewildered to find an impromptu celebration in progress. Un dernier chose, Chef Auguste said, handing Miguel a package. The recipe for my soufflé, for when you need to impress at corporate dinners. Thanks, Chef, Miguel replied. Though I think my way of impressing people is a bit different now. As Musk prepared to leave, he paused beside Miguel. First meeting on Monday at 9. And Miguel, keep that brutal honesty. Just maybe tone down the comments on my French pronunciation. No promises, Miguel replied with a grin. After all, you hired me for my candor. And so, as the San Francisco sun illuminated a new day, the tale of the waiter who dared to be brutally honest with the world's richest man came to an end. Or perhaps, more accurately, to its true beginning. Because sometimes, in the most unexpected places and the most improbable ways, brutal honesty can open doors we never knew existed, even if it includes suggesting ketchup for a 120 steak.